Welcome back to Sleepers Podcast. I'm Mike, and tonight we're talking about something that sounds small until it quietly takes over your whole day. Tiny things that ruin a whole day. Some of them are ridiculous. Some of them sting more than they should, and somehow both kinds can follow you around for hours. Joe's here with me tonight. Joe, thanks for doing this.
Happy to be here. Also, happy that we picked a topic that feels personally insulting. It does feel targeted. It really does. Like, this episode was designed by my worst Tuesday. That's fair. How are you, though? I'm good. A little tired. Calm, though. Good tired. Same. The useful kind of tired. Exactly. Not dramatic, just soft around the edges. That's a nice way to put it. So let's get into it. Tiny things that ruin a whole day. I've always found it strange how fast your mood can shift from something so minor. Not a huge life event, not real disaster, just one stupid little thing, and suddenly everything after it feels slightly crooked. Crooked is the right word, because sometimes it's not even ruined in a loud way. Nothing is exploding. You're still doing your normal day, but internally it feels like one of the wheels is bent. Right. You can still answer emails, still go outside, still make lunch, but the internal weather changed. That phrase is exactly it. Internal weather. Because some days it's not even that you're upset. It's more like the light.
You wake up fine. You step into the kitchen, spill coffee on your shirt. And suddenly the day has a personality.
A bad one.
A very smug one. There's something especially offensive about morning inconveniences. They feel louder than they are. Because the day hasn't built any goodwill yet.
That's true. If something annoying happens at 4 in the afternoon, sometimes you can absorb it. You've already had food, maybe one decent conversation. Something good happened. But at 7:12 in the morning, if your sock hits something wet, it feels spiritual. It honestly does. That's not a small inconvenience, that's a personal attack. It changes your understanding of life for a second. It really does. Wet sock on the floor is one of the purest examples of this day has turned on me. And the crazy part is how quickly your brain starts building a case. It's never just, my sock got wet. It becomes, of course this happened. Of course this is how today's gonna go. I knew I shouldn't have trusted this morning. That spiral is so human. One tiny thing happens and your mind immediately starts narrating. It starts making a documentary. Slow piano, black and white footage. At this point, he knew the day was lost. That's actually funny. It's true, though. We become incredibly dramatic for very ordinary reasons. We do. And sometimes it is funny later. In the moment, though, it doesn't feel funny at all. Not even a little. What's a practical one for you? A very low-stakes, stupid thing that genuinely ruined your day once.
Oh, I've got one. This is embarrassing, which means it's perfect. I had a morning a couple years ago where I was already running late. Not horribly late, but enough that everything needed to go right. I made toast. Simple, safe, civilized. I go to put butter on it, and the toast is too hot, so the butter starts sliding, which is annoying already. Then I try to catch the plate with one hand, my keys are in the other hand, I drop the keys into the sink, and at the exact same moment, the toast flips face down on the floor. No. Face down. Butter side. Full commitment. That's bad. It gets worse. I just stood there looking at it, and because I was late, I made the unbelievably bad decision to pick it up and still eat it. Hold on. I know, it was a weak moment. Joe, listen, I was stressed. You ate floor butter toast? I did. And that's not even the part that ruined the day.
The part that ruined the day was that I couldn't stop thinking about myself having crossed that line. That's actually perfect for this topic, because all day I kept having these little flashes of, you ate toast off the floor this morning. I'd be answering a message and my brain would go, interesting, a floor toast man is typing. That's brutal. It completely changed how I felt about myself for like 12 hours. Not in any serious moral sense, obviously, but enough to make me feel slightly defeated. It's amazing how those tiny humiliations stay alive in your head.
Exactly. It wasn't the toast, it was the feeling of having been reduced to that kind of creature before 8 a.m. That's the thing. Some small moments aren't painful, they're just diminishing.
Right. They make you feel less put together than you were hoping to be.
Which, to be fair, is not a high bar at breakfast. Apparently, it was too high for me. I had one like that with keys once. I lost my keys inside my apartment. Not outside, not somewhere mysterious. Inside. And I was sure they were in a reasonable place. So I did that thing where you search with confidence first. Calmly lifting things, checking pockets, retracing your steps. The dignified search. Exactly. Then 10 minutes later, it becomes a less dignified search. Drawers opening harder than necessary. Mild accusations directed at furniture. Interesting that the table would do this. That was basically the tone. Then, after about 25 minutes, I found them in the refrigerator. No way. In the refrigerator. That's incredible. I had put milk away while holding my keys and apparently just completed the task in a very confused way. That would ruin my day too, because then you have to live with the information. That was the problem. Not even the lost time. It was the fact that I had to walk around for the rest of the day knowing there had been a brief moment where I thought, yes, the refrigerator is where keys go. I love that your brain made one terrible filing decision and then left you to deal with the consequences. It abandoned me completely. That's actually one of the weird categories of tiny things. Not pain, not inconvenience, just evidence that you might be more tired than you thought. Or more fragile than you thought. Bad sleep does that too. A bad night of sleep can make every small problem feel twice as heavy.
Absolutely. Bad sleep turns every inconvenience into character development.
It really does. On low sleep, a missing spoon feels symbolic.
Exactly. You're standing in the kitchen like, of course, even the spoons are against me.
And everyone else would look at you and say, it's just a spoon. Which makes it worse, because they're technically right. That's part of what's interesting about this. Small things often get dismissed because they sound ridiculous out loud. But the feeling is still real.
That's especially true with emotional stuff.
It is.
Because if you tell somebody, one message kind of ruined my day, it sounds dramatic before you even finish the sentence.
Exactly. But everyone knows what that feels like.
One short reply from the wrong person. One weird pause. One sentence that isn't even openly mean, just colder than usual.
Those can stay with you for hours.
Sometimes the smaller they are, the longer they stay. Because you can't even prove they happened. That's a really good point. There's nothing clean enough to confront. Nothing solid enough to point at. It's just a shift in tone. And now you're carrying it around. And part of you keeps trying to be rational. Maybe they're busy. Maybe I'm reading into it. Maybe it's nothing. But the other part of you already felt it.
I had that happen once in a way that really stayed with me. It was such a small thing on paper. Someone I cared about sent me a message, and there was one word in it that felt off. Not openly cruel, not even rude exactly, just clipped, colder than how they usually spoke to me.
That's enough.
It was enough. And what made it strange was that nothing else dramatic happened that day. I still did all the normal things. I went out, got coffee, answered people, had conversations. But underneath all of it, I kept returning to that one word. I kept rereading the message, which never helps.
Never once in history has rereading helped.
Not a single time. It just made the word feel bigger every time. And I remember thinking, this is such a minor thing. Why is it following me around like this? But it changed everything. Food tasted flatter, music sounded different. I was less patient than usual. I wasn't even fully sad. I just felt off.
That's the worst version sometimes. Not enough to cry, not enough to talk about, just enough to tint the whole day.
Exactly. And later I found out it really wasn't some massive hidden meaning. They were tired, stressed, distracted, which made sense. But the effect had already happened.
That's so real. Because once something gets under your skin, the explanation can arrive later, but your nervous system already had its meeting.
That's exactly what it felt like.
Also, it's always amazing how one word can do that. Not a paragraph, not a speech, just one slightly wrong word, and suddenly you're staring out a window like you're in an
That's fair.
It's true, though.
It is. And there's embarrassment in being affected by it, which makes it lonelier.
Because you want to be the kind of person who just shrugs it off.
Right.
But when it's somebody you care about, your brain measures everything differently. Their normal is your normal. So when the tone shifts even a little, you notice.
And sometimes the smallest sign is enough. One shorter reply than usual, one look that seems distant, one joke that lands strangely.
Or being ignored in a subtle way. That one can ruin hours. Not being openly rejected. That would almost be easier. I mean, when you say something in a group and nobody really picks it up, then 2 minutes later someone else says something similar and suddenly it's alive. That particular experience is so specific and so common. It sounds tiny, but it can make you go quiet for the rest of the day.
Especially if you were already feeling a little exposed.
Exactly. Then your brain goes, interesting. We are apparently not landing today.
I've had smaller versions of that too. Even just sending a message you thought was normal, then getting no response for a long time, and realizing it's bothering you more than you want to admit.
Oh, absolutely. And the annoying part is you still know better. You know people have lives. Phones die. Work happens. Nothing may be wrong at all. But your mind has spare time. Too much of it.
Too much imagination.
Dangerous amount.
Another smaller relatable one for me is when you have one awkward social moment and it keeps replaying long after everyone else has forgotten it. I did this once at a coffee place. The person at the counter said, "Enjoy." And for some reason, I replied, "You too."
Classic.
A classic. But what made it worse was that I then tried to correct it and somehow made it stranger. I said, I mean, not the coffee, unless... And then stopped because there was nowhere to go.
Oh no.
So I just collected my drink and left with the energy of a man who had recently failed a basic public interaction.
That's actually funny.
It's funny now. At the time, though, I replayed it for an absurd amount of time.
Because awkward moments don't hurt in the room. They hurt on the replay.
That's exactly it.
The room moves on. You carry the footage home.
And in your memory, it becomes 10% worse every hour.
Minimum.
Which is part of why some tiny frustrations become funny later. Once the shame clears, you can see how human it was.
Floor toast is funny now. At the time, it was a moral collapse.
That's fair.
But not all of them become funny. Some stay heavy in a weird, quiet way. What's one? I had one a while back that was so small, I almost hated admitting how much it got to me. I sent somebody a message, somebody important to me. Nothing dramatic, just checking in, asking something simple, trying to be warm. And they replied with 2 words. Not mean words, just flat, dry, no room in them.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember staring at the screen thinking, that could mean absolutely nothing. They could be busy, tired, upset about something unrelated. Any adult explanation was available. But I still felt this drop in my stomach.
Because tone lands before logic does.
Exactly. And I spent the whole day pretending I was not doing that thing where you keep unlocking your phone for no reason.
I know that feeling.
You tell yourself you're not waiting. Then suddenly you've checked the time 19 times and somehow also checked the conversation 19 times.
Right.
What made it worse was how normal everything else looked. I went to the store, talked to a friend, ate dinner, all of that. And the whole time there was this low-grade ache under everything. Nothing severe. Just enough to make the day feel gray.
That kind of feeling can be so hard to explain.
It can. Because if you say it out loud, it sounds pathetic. A short text made me sad. But that wasn't really it. What made me sad was what my brain attached to it. Doubt, distance, insecurity, all that stuff. The tiny message just opened the door.
That's really well put. And I remember being annoyed at myself too, which is another layer, because then it's not just the feeling, it's also, why am I being like this? That self-judgment makes small hurts feel even more private. Exactly. You almost don't want comfort because you don't feel entitled to it. And yet, those are often the moments that do the most quiet damage. Not because they're huge, but because they fit directly into the softest spot. That's it. They're small enough to slip past your defenses. I think that's why tiny things can hit harder than big things sometimes. Big things announce themselves. You know what happened. You know why you're upset. People around you can usually see it too. Small things are harder. They drift in, change your mood, and leave you trying to explain a bruise that barely has a shape.
That's true.
Big things give you a reason. Small things give you an atmosphere. That's such a good way to say it. Also, with big things, people are usually more generous. With small things, even you can become your own worst witness. You start arguing against yourself immediately. It's not a big deal. You're being ridiculous. Let it go. Meanwhile, your whole body is like, no, apparently we will not. Exactly. There's also something very human about how quickly we build stories from tiny details. One look from somebody, one slightly odd handshake, one message with a period where there usually isn't one. The period can be devastating.
The period has ended friendships in people's heads that did not actually end.
That's actually funny because it's so true.
I'm serious. You see okay instead of okay, and suddenly the room temperature drops. There should be a study on the emotional violence of punctuation. There probably is. And if there isn't, there should be. What I do like about all this, though, is that later on, when enough time passes, some of these moments become strangely affectionate memories. Not all of them, but some. Definitely. The practical ones especially. Like losing your keys in the refrigerator. That one should stay with you forever, honestly. I know, I've accepted that. Or my toast disaster. At some point, it stops being a personal failure and becomes a story your friends enjoy too much, which is helpful. There's comfort in realizing how ordinary these
That might be the nicest part of it. Everybody has them. Everybody has had a day turn strange because of something objectively minor. And being human is, in part, being more permeable than you expected. That sounds nicer than what I was gonna say. What were you gonna say? I was gonna say, being human is realizing you can be emotionally taken out by a sock and a text message in the same week. That's also true. It's less elegant, but it's true.
It is. And I think there's something calming in admitting that. Not every day is ruined by huge tragedy. Sometimes it's a bad night of sleep, an awkward moment, one cold word, one tiny thing you can't seem to shake. When the honest thing is just to notice it.
Mm-hmm. Notice it, maybe laugh at it when you can, and maybe be a little kinder to yourself when you can. That's good. Because some of those small things really are small. And some of them are small on the outside, but connected to something bigger underneath. It makes sense that they hit differently.
Exactly. The size of the moment and the size of the feeling are not always the same.
That should be on a wall somewhere.
It sounds more polished than I intended.
Still good?
I'll take it.
Also, for the record, if anybody listening stepped in something wet this morning, I want them to know I understand them completely.
A message of solidarity.
Deep solidarity.
For the emotionally bruised and the lightly inconvenienced alike.
Beautiful. Very inclusive.
That's what we aim for.
Even for floor toast people?
Especially for floor toast people.
Thank you. That means a lot.
I think that's enough for tonight.
I think so too.
Joe, thanks for being here.
Always good to be here.
And thanks to all of you for listening. We hope this one felt familiar in a gentle way, and maybe made you feel a little less strange for the tiny moments that can throw off a whole day. This was episode 4 of Sleepers Podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself, get some rest, and thanks for spending this time